my life is different because people have believed in me all throughout my journey. There were people that entered into my life that had incredible hope for me, saw something in me that I didn't see for myself, and it changed me. One particular instance that I remember pretty closely, pretty dearly is when I was about 17, I was on a mission trip to Honduras, and there was a youth pastor, Alan, who was leading our team, and we were doing several different things, but we were taking on this construction project, and I had a little bit of construction experience, not a lot, and there were definitely some more qualified people, but Alan asked me to head up the whole project, to be the team leader, to kind of organize everybody, and there was something about him having hope in me that actually put me in this place where I could hear from God. I remember at the end of that project being on top of this roof in the middle of Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and I was looking over the city, and I had this thought that I am the most at home now that I've ever been. And it had nothing to do with location and everything to do with being in the will of God. I think God was beginning to speak to me in that moment about my heart, my calling for leadership and ministry. But it was because Alan hoped in me. He saw something in me. And I think hope is one of our best tools, one of our most fierce weapons as leaders, as spiritual influencers in people's life. If we're going to pastor people well, then we have to do it from a posture of hope. I love what Steve Backlund says. He says that there are no hopeless circumstances, only hopeless people. And here's what he's saying. He's saying that nothing is impossible with God. God, Romans 15:13 says that he's the God of all hope. There is nothing that God is ever hopeless about. But sometimes, so there's no circumstances that God's not going to enter into with hope. But sometimes there are hopeless people inside of those circumstances. And part of our call, if we're going to influence people and shepherd people, pastor people well, is to always keep our hope on, to never enter into a circumstance or a relationship, a situation with people that we're not hopeless about. When we surrender hope, I believe that we actually surrender our authority to speak life and direction into a situation. Our hope is a key in seeing people transformed and step into their purpose. And so it's vital that we learn to keep our hope on. Here's one of the things that I've recognized in my own life. When I enter into somebody else's situation, maybe they invite me into it, maybe I invite myself into it, but when I enter into somebody else's situation and I don't have hope, it usually reveals actually something wrong with me. It may be a judgment that I've made about that person, but it could also be maybe a familiar situation or spirit or even stronghold in my life. And whenever I don't have hope, I love what Francis Frangipane says. He says this, that any area that is not glimmering with hope is evidence of a stronghold of the enemy, and it must be torn down. You see, my lack of hope actually reveals a lie that I'm believing. A stronghold, we'll talk about this later, is a house of thought built on lies. And so there's something that's off in what I'm believing because God's the God of all hope. And so I'm not seeing it from God's perspective. I'm believing that lie, and that's what's causing me to be off. And so I've got to deal with my own stronghold, the own lies that I'm believing if I'm ever going to speak life into people. But people need you to bring hope for them. If you can't bring hope into a situation as a voice of spiritual wisdom and counsel, as a voice of leadership, then you need to pull yourself out until you can get your hope on, because it's crucial that when we care for people that we come to them with hope. It doesn't mean that we're blindly optimistic. Some people are in dark places and have deep problems that need to be sorted through. But if we can't see the end with hope, then it makes it really difficult for us to ever bring the heart of God into a situation, because God is never hopeless. And so when we keep our hope on, what we're doing is we're saying, God, I believe that you can still move. Nothing's totally lost. Nothing's too far gone that it can't be redeemed. And so I want to enter into that situation with you. And so whatever you're walking people through, maybe it's marital issues, maybe it's issues with a kid that's stopped following Jesus, maybe it's loss that they're walking through, that if we can't keep our hope on, then we actually surrender our authority. And so my encouragement to you is that anytime you enter a situation where you don't have hope, that you would actually take it to God, begin to process with him, find that lie, and allow him to speak hope to you so that you can then be a voice of hope in other people's lives. Hope is one of your most powerful weapons as you're pastoring people.